You dreamt of breakfast in bed. You got a beard in your face, a sheep on your foot, and a man yelling something cheerful while waving an axe. Welcome to the Viking Age, where mornings begin at sword point. And the day's agenda includes chores, frostbite, and possibly a dramatic farewell. You haven't even found your pants, and someone's already handing you a weapon like it's a cup of tea. No one's panicking. No one's sad. In fact, they seem excited. That's when it hits you. In this world, people don't fear death. They rehearse it. Because to a Viking, the final moment isn't a tragedy. It's a closing monologue. And that's what we're doing tonight. Not surviving. Debuting. You're about to meet 5 Vikings who didn't just face the end. They edited the script and insisted on a better punchline. One made a threat using pigs. One stabbed a king during a loyalty ceremony. One cracked a joke during his own execution. One died mid-poem, and another paused a battle to fix his rhyming scheme. Not everyone gets a statue, but if you time your last words right, you get something better. Immortality via gossip. So if you're ready to learn how to leave history the Viking way, loud, weird, and possibly mid-joke, grab your helmet and let's begin. Ragnar and the riddle of the piglets. You've heard of going out with a bang. Ragnar Lothbrok went out with a barnyard metaphor and the kind of smugness you usually only see on reality show contestants right before getting eliminated. You're standing there, watching this Viking legend being thrown into a pit of snakes by King Ella, a punishment so unnecessarily creative it makes you wonder if medieval kings were just bored playwrights with access to reptiles. There's no last-minute rescue, no twist, just a pit, some snakes, and one man calmly making eye contact with everyone. Like this is exactly how he expected things to go. And then it happens. Ragnar leans into the moment, raises his voice just enough to make sure no one misses it, and delivers the most cryptic, most Viking sentence ever uttered in a venom-filled pit. The piglets will squeal when they hear how the old boar died. Everyone blinks. Did he just go full farm metaphor? Yes he did. And the best part, it's not just poetry, it's a threat. A very specific, agriculturally themed announcement that his sons, the piglets, are about to make King Ella's life extremely complicated. And they do. A few years later, the piglets arrive in England with what historians politely call the Great Heathen Army, and what anyone else would describe as a mobile Norse thunderstorm. They carve through East Anglia, storm into Northumbria, and eventually do to Ella what no snake could ever quite manage. They end his story. Now, here's the fun twist. Modern scholars think the snake pit might have been completely made up, that the whole thing was just a clever backstory invented after the fact to justify a massive Viking revenge tour. And honestly, respect. Because if you're going to unleash an army, might as well build them a theatrical origin story. Preferably one involving reptiles and psychological warfare via livestock metaphors. But fiction or not, the line survived. Not the armor he wore, not the ship he arrived in. Just one weird, perfect sentence. That's what makes Ragnar's death so memorably Viking. He didn't try to fight it. He didn't fear it. He saw the exit coming and rewrote the ending. No screaming, no grand speech. Just a poetic pig pun so confidently delivered that even the executioner probably hesitated for a second, like, wait, should I be worried? And that's the Viking mindset in a nutshell. You don't have to survive the story. You just have to make sure everyone talks about the ending. Even if that ending involves a man, a snake pit, and the most threatening farm analogy in European history. If Ragnar showed you how to leave with a punchline, then what comes next is proof that you don't need fame, muscles, or even a decent reputation to deliver a show-stopping final scene. Sometimes all it takes is being underestimated and very, very petty. You're not a warrior. You're not a legend. You're not even on anyone's most likely to survive this battle list. You're Virga, the smallest guy in the room, the background character, the one people forget is even there until someone needs firewood or comic relief. And yet somehow you've outlived them all. Your king, Hrolf Kraki, is gone. His hall is burning. His champions, those tall, dramatic men with cool names and even cooler exit scenes, are all very much not responding. You're standing in the wreckage, ash in your hair, clutching your ribs, and wondering if you're actually alive or just experiencing very elaborate survivor's guilt. And then, like a deleted scene from a badly written medieval drama, the guy who caused all this, Jorvard, your king's cousin, turned backstabbing usurper, calls for you. He doesn't threaten you, doesn't sneer. Instead, he smiles like a man who's very confident this scene is going to go exactly how he planned. He hands you his sword, his actual sword, and asks you to swear loyalty, right here, in front of everyone, with his shiny king face waiting for validation. Now, there are many ways to respond to this moment. You could bow, you could fake loyalty and run later, you could politely faint, but you, being Virga, choose option D. You take the sword and use it to stab the new king on the spot. No preamble, no speech, no eye contact, just a clean, casual betrayal in front of all the wrong people, using his own sword. It's not a duel, it's not even vengeance. It's a moment so brilliantly petty that if Twitter had existed, this would have trended for weeks under the instant karma. Of course, you don't walk away from this. You're cut down almost immediately. But honestly, who cares? Your job wasn't to survive. It was to absolutely wreck the narrative. And you did. And centuries later, no one remembers Hjorvard for winning. They remember him for being too confident, too dramatic, and too generous with sharp objects. You're remembered for turning a loyalty ceremony into a slapstick finale. Because in the Viking world, glory didn't always go to the strongest. Sometimes it went to the guy who waited until everyone underestimated him, and then rewrote the final scene with the kind of timing that makes bards cry tears of joy. So next time someone hands you a sword and asks for your loyalty, just remember Virga. Small, unimpressive, entirely overlooked, and absolutely unforgettable. You're a Jomsviking, which means you're part of an elite brotherhood of Viking mercenaries who live, and clearly intend to die, by a strict code. You've just lost a battle, and your captors, following tradition, have lined you all up for execution, one by one. Neat, tidy, organized, it's all very professional. But something is off. No one's crying. Some men are even requesting to be beheaded from the front, so they can prove they're not afraid. The vibe is somewhere between solemn and bizarrely competitive. Everyone's trying to die impressively. Then it's your turn. You kneel. You feel the tension. The axe is raised. But instead of whispering a prayer or saying goodbye to your ancestors, you casually turn and ask, "Would you mind pulling my hair forward? I don't want to get blood on it." The executioner freezes. The crowd blinks. You've just inserted a grooming request into a mass execution. And he actually does it. Gently pulls your hair forward like you're at a Viking blow-dry bar. The axe swings, and at the last moment, you jerk your head back. The axe misses. His hands don't. There's a beat of silence. Then someone laughs. Then another. And suddenly, the commander himself, Jarl Eirik, is laughing so hard he's practically wheezing. "That was brilliant," he says, between gasps. "You're free." And staying completely on brand, you reply, "Only if you let the others go, too." And somehow, he agrees. The execution ends. The crowd disperses, and history stumbles away, laughing. Now, historians are suspicious. It sounds like a saga exaggeration. But then archaeologists dig up a nearby mass grave. Dozens of decapitated Viking skeletons, some clearly cut from the front, too specific to ignore. And that's the power of the Viking mindset. If you can't control your fate, at least control the narrative. Dying wasn't just about honor. It was about style, about leaving behind a moment so weird, so oddly timed, that people still talk about it 1,000 years later. You're in Norway, year 1030, standing beside King Olaf, who's just returned from exile, looking like he's ready for a motivational montage, except his army is tiny, and the people waiting to greet him are mostly local farmers who brought pitchforks instead of applause. You're Thormod. You've written poems for kings, sung about warriors, and now, standing on the edge of what's clearly going to be a disaster, you do what any committed Viking skald would do. You recite a funeral poem. Not in secret, not quietly. You deliver it like it's the halftime show, listing off heroes and metaphors, calling people by name, basically giving a eulogy before anyone's technically dead. Then the battle starts. Olaf rushes to the front and is immediately taken down. His guards fall around him. And somehow, against all odds, you don't. You're wounded, yes, bruised, bleeding, but still upright, wandering through the wreckage of the fight like the guy who stayed at the party too long and forgot everyone else had already gone home. An arrow, fired from somewhere you'll never know, slices through the air and buries itself in your body like it had a very clear opinion about your extended runtime. You do what you do best. You turn the moment into a final performance. You start reciting a poem about your own wound, something lyrical and raw and painfully on brand. And then, in perfect Viking fashion, you collapse before you can finish the last line. Someone nearby, just a kid really, a teenager named Harold, hears you and delivers the final words for you. Clean, respectful, no edits. And with that, the curtain closes. Not just on your life, but on your poem. Completed, sort of. Remembered, definitely. Because in the Viking mindset, even the quietest exits deserved a sense of pacing. You didn't always get to write the whole ending. But if you delivered your part with heart, fate was usually kind enough to send someone or something to wrap it up. Then, sword in both hands, no armor, you charge into battle like a man who didn't get the memo about survival being an option. You fight like a myth. You go down like a headline. One arrow to the throat and curtain closed. According to the sagas, you arrived in 400 ships. The survivors went home in 24. Mathematically devastating. Cinematically, Oscar-worthy. So, after 5 very loud, very poetic, and occasionally pig-themed Viking exits, you start to realize something. These people weren't trying to avoid death. They were just trying to make it interesting. You've seen a man oink defiantly at his enemies. You've seen a background character stab his way into the spotlight. You've seen someone prank their executioner, someone get arrow-sniped mid-poem, and a king pause a literal battlefield to fix his rhyme scheme. And every single one of them had the same thought. Well, if I have to go, it might as well be iconic. That's the Viking mindset. Death wasn't a failure. It wasn't even a bad day. It was a stage, a final monologue. One last glorious chance to confuse your enemies and leave your friends speechless. Not with grief, but with a quote they could dramatically whisper into a campfire for the next 3 centuries. Because Vikings didn't just believe in legacy, they performed it. No one remembers what shield you used. They remember what you said right before someone broke it over your head. They remember how you turned your final moments into a plot twist, preferably one involving snakes, poetry, or light physical comedy. And let's be honest, most of them didn't even win. Ragnar died, Olaf died, Harold died, Verger died, the Jomsvikings almost all died. But what stayed wasn't who lived, it was how they left. And that's where the magic is. If the Viking Age had Yelp reviews, most of these guys would have 5 stars under exit strategy. So the next time you find yourself overwhelmed, embarrassed, or slightly surrounded by metaphorical snakes, just remember, you don't need to be a hero. You just need to stick the landing. Say something weird. Say something witty. Say something that would make your enemies pause mid-victory and go, wait, what did he mean by that? Because maybe you can't outrun death, but you can absolutely make it your closing act. And if you do it right, someone, somewhere, will still be talking about it 1,000 years later. Possibly in a YouTube comment section. Possibly under this video. Thanks for watching, and if this Viking chaos brought a smile to your face, feel free to give us a thumbs up, maybe even subscribe, and let us know in the comments. Which Viking exit would you secretly want to copy? Sleep well tonight. And if you must dream dramatically, make sure there's a good closing line. Last night, you dreamed of a quiet 2-bedroom apartment. Soft bed, warm light, maybe even a door that actually shuts. This morning, you wake up face to face with a goat, wrapped in a fur blanket that smells like regret, in a house where privacy doesn't exist, and neither do walls. Welcome to Viking life. Before you get anywhere near ships or swords, you'll have to make it through smoky rooms, questionable breakfasts, uneven laws, itchy wool, and conversations you didn't mean to hear, but now can't unhear. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And somehow, it's the beginning of a world that would leave half of Europe very concerned. You try to sit up, but it's hard to look majestic when there's straw in your hair and a chicken tap dancing on your rib cage like it's auditioning for a farmyard musical. The Longhouse is already alive, in the same way a group chat explodes at 6 a.m. for no good reason. You squint through the smoky air and see everyone. Your parents, siblings, cousins, some guy who might be your uncle, but could also be a neighbor who never left, and a solid cast of barnyard animals all acting like rent-paying tenants. Viking architecture wasn't designed by architects. It was designed by people who gave up halfway through building a barn and thought, let's just move in. 20 people and a small zoo all packed into a smoky wooden box with one central fire that keeps you warm, roasts your eyebrows, and gives you a persistent cough that would have gone viral on WebMD. You toss off your bedding, which smells like a wet bear with trust issues, and plant your feet on the dirt floor, immediately stepping on something that squishes in, a way no solid should. You look down. You look at the goat. The goat looks at you. The tension is mutual. It blinks first. You win. Barely. Hygiene is a choose-your-own adventure. You splash cold rainwater on your face like a Viking influencer doing a morning routine reel, Then dry off with a cloth that's either a shirt, a curtain, or part of yesterday's tent. The lines are blurry. Your breath smells like recycled stew, which honestly might be exactly what's for breakfast. Again. Meanwhile, your great-uncle's whittling something no one understands. Your brother is being screamed at for chasing a goose with the family spoon. And the rooster, who operates on chaos time, has been screaming since 4 a.m. because clocks are for cowards. And as you pull on clothes that were clearly designed by someone who hated skin, one thought hits you harder than the ceiling beam you just walked into. This isn't a quirky Viking experience. This is your every morning now. Loud, itchy, smoky, and aggressively communal. You haven't even had breakfast yet, and you already miss your imaginary dishwasher. See, Viking life isn't all raiding and roaring. It's mostly chores. Endless, repetitive, aggressively physical chores. The kind of chores that make you nostalgic for modern inconveniences like printer jams and slow Wi-Fi. Here, you start your day by gathering water from a stream that's both uphill and somehow frozen solid in July. And while you're doing all this, your mother is running the household like a CEO who hasn't had coffee in 3 years. She's stocking the larder, mending sails, weaving cloth, and muttering about how no one knows how to properly salt a fish anymore. Viking mums don't play around. They run this world. And if they had LinkedIn, it would just say, everything. Meanwhile, your father is outside wrestling a plow and pretending he doesn't see the cow chewing on his boot. He'll spend the whole day farming land that produces approximately 4 edible turnips and 17 rocks. By dinner, his back will sound like someone breaking kindling over a barrel. So yes, you'll spend your day breaking your back, dodging livestock, and quietly judging your neighbors. But when the sun goes down, and you've done your 100 tasks with only minor emotional scarring, you'll sit by the hearth, look at your soot-covered hands, and think, at least I'm not the one scrubbing the goat again. The next morning hits like a cold slap from nature herself. Your toes are numb, your back sounds like bubble wrap, and your shirt has apparently been claimed by a goose with zero respect for personal boundaries. You wrestle it back and begin layering up, not for style, but for survival. Viking dressing isn't get the look. It's don't die of exposure before lunch. You start with wool, thick, itchy, suspiciously damp in places. Add fur, which smells like the past, and your neighbor's dog. Then that third layer, you don't remember what it is, but everyone wears one, and peer pressure is real. By the time you're done, you resemble a sentient pile of winter laundry with identity issues. There's no mirror, just a frozen puddle reflecting what might be your face, or possibly your ancestor checking in. Your hair? It's a vibe. The legendary Viking reverse mullet is still going strong, short in the front like you're applying for a loan, long in the back like you're headlining a Scandinavian rock festival. It's less of a haircut and more of a cultural event. The first time the English saw it, they thought it was either war or an early midlife crisis. But hey, you wear it with pride, because no one's questioning your style when you can kill dinner, skin it, and turn the leftovers into a belt. Speaking of accessories, yes, they exist. Mostly pins, clasps, and little metal objects that stab you just enough to remind you they're there. It's fashion with consequences. Your cloak has holes. Your boots are mostly hope and dried sinew, but at least you still have boots. The guy down the hill's been chasing after his for 2 days and losing to the same sheep. Respectfully, that's not a fashion problem. That's a lifestyle choice. Cleanliness? Let's just say you bathed last week and people noticed. In a good way. You splash some cold water on your face, smear off the ash with your sleeve, and pretend you just finished a minimalist skincare routine. The Viking version of self-care is surviving long enough to pretend it wasn't that bad. And somehow, under all those layers, goat-scented accessories, and zero fabric softener, you're officially dressed. Not comfortable, not fashionable, but dressed. You're cold, itchy, slightly lopsided. But in Viking terms, that's peak readiness. Because here, looking good doesn't mean turning heads. It means keeping yours warm, attached, and ideally not stolen by the wind. By the time midday shows up like an overworked intern, with zero enthusiasm, your body is already questioning its life choices. You've herded things that refuse to be herded, hauled objects that clearly weren't meant to be moved by humans, and had at least one existential moment with a goat. It's lunchtime, and you're starving, emotionally, spiritually, and very much physically. At the center of the longhouse, something has been boiling since early morning, or possibly since the previous century. The pot bubbles like it's plotting something. It smells vaguely edible, which in this timeline is a rave review. No one asks what's in it. Asking questions just invites responsibility. You grab a bowl, which feels more like a suggestion of a bowl than an actual vessel, and scoop yourself a ladleful of whatever the universe is cooking today. The stew is thick. Not comforting thick. More like, this used to be several different meals thick. It tastes like turnip, stress, and something that might have been enthusiastic celery in a past life. You chew with commitment, not because it's good, but because you've already made eye contact with it and can't back down now. There's bread, too, or at least something bread adjacent. Dense, flat, mildly defensive. The kind of carb that could double as a weapon in a tavern brawl. Some days it's made with flour, other days with bark and stubborn optimism. Today's loaf has the texture of a roofing tile, but you eat it anyway, mostly because it doesn't move, and that's a refreshing change. Health-wise, let's just say your digestive system is doing its best. Sure, it occasionally makes noises that could summon spirits, but that's just part of the Viking experience. If your stomach isn't mildly offended at least once a day, are you even living authentically? Still, the magic of Viking lunch isn't in the flavor, it's in the silence. That shared moment when everyone's too tired to talk, too hungry to complain, and too committed to pretend this isn't their third helping of boiled question marks. You sit by the fire, chewing through your bowl of ancestral mystery, feeling oddly proud, not because the food is good, but because it didn't defeat you. You finish your meal with the slow blink of someone who has accepted their place in history as a survivor of stew. And as you hand your bowl back to whoever looks least likely to throw it at a goat, one thing is certain. It may not be gourmet, but it's hot, filling, and, miraculously, not alive. In Viking standards, that's a solid 5 stars. After lunch, when your arms are sore and your motivation is missing, someone suggests a game. And not just any game, the Viking game, Schneffertafel, a name that sounds like someone sneezed mid-sentence, but is, in fact, a dramatic, strategic, and occasionally friendship-ending board game. You're skeptical, mostly because you've played this before. Last time, you lost in 6 moves and your opponent celebrated like he'd just conquered England, which honestly felt a little personal. The board comes out, a wooden square etched with runes, smelling faintly of mead and vengeance. The pieces are carved from bone or stone, or in one case, something suspiciously tooth-like. You sit cross-legged on the floor, preparing yourself mentally, not for the game, for the emotional damage. Nefataful isn't like chess. It's weirder. One player defends a king trying to escape. The other surrounds and captures him. It's a battle of wits that escalates faster than a comment section. 10 minutes in, and your cousin is accusing your aunt of cheating, your uncle is shouting strategy like it's a spell, and someone's threatening to flip the board over a misplaced goat hoof. But this is what counts as leisure here. High stakes, slightly aggressive leisure. There's no Netflix, no phones, just the pure, unfiltered drama of competitive board gaming in a society where passive aggression is expressed through carved ivory. And yet, despite the tension, the game is addictive. You start predicting moves, thinking ahead, whispering threats. You fake confidence. You over-celebrate minor victories. You become the villain. And you love it. Games like this weren't just entertainment. They were mental prep for actual battles. Or at least, that's what you tell yourself when you accidentally trap your own king and everyone claps politely, but with the exact same tone they'd use at your funeral. Eventually, someone wins. Someone loses. Someone pretends not to care. And the board gets packed away with the silent understanding that revenge will be served sometime next week, preferably with stew. As you stand up, mildly bruised in spirit, you realize something. Even in a world of axes and ice, Vikings still needed games, not just to pass the time, but to remember that even in chaos, strategy matters, especially if it helps you beat your cousin who totally cheated last time, and you're absolutely not still mad about it. By early afternoon, the post-lunch calm starts to fade, and the cold reminds you it never really left. It was just waiting for you to stop moving. You step outside, hoping to stretch your legs, only to be greeted by a wall of wind that hits harder than your cousin after losing at board games. The world is white, frozen, and making that very specific crunchy sound that says, you're not going anywhere fast, but life, still happening. No one here gets to hibernate. The animals still need feeding. The firewood still needs chopping. And the frozen stream you were told to fetch water from now requires a chisel, 2 prayers, and mild emotional detachment. You no longer walk so much as slide purposefully while pretending it was intentional. And that's when you see them, your fellow Vikings, out on the ice, gliding like it's the Norse version of a TikTok trend. Graceful, focused, and slightly threatening. They're wearing bone skates, yes, actual bones, tied to their feet with the same rope used for everything from fishing to emotionally binding family drama. There's no padding, no helmets, just full-speed confidence on frozen water. It's impressive. It's terrifying. It's also, apparently, the afternoon activity. Naturally, you agree to join. Not because you're ready, but because no one wants to be the one left on the snowbank holding someone else's chicken. You strap on your pair, polished moose bone, vintage last year, and step onto the ice like someone who's read about balance but never actually met it in person. The first few meters are experimental. You flail, you pivot, you reconsider several life decisions, but eventually, through a combination of momentum, panic, and sheer Viking spite, you start to move. Fast enough to terrify yourself, but not fast enough to impress the 6-year-old currently skating backward and judging you silently. You manage one full loop before gravity gently reminds you who's in charge. You wipe out into a drift of snow, arms flung wide like you're embracing defeat with enthusiasm. And from the ground, you laugh, because somehow this mess is the highlight of your day. This is winter here. It's cold, unpredictable, and occasionally involves moose bones tied to your ankles, but it's also kind of fun. Not in a warm blanket and cinnamon tea way, more like, I didn't die today, and now I feel invincible. And really, that's about as close to joy as it gets when the sun disappears at 3 p.m. After surviving lunch, bone skates, and mild ego damage from being outpaced by a child on ice, you start to feel unstoppable. Like maybe, just maybe, you've cracked this Viking thing. Then someone casually mentions a funeral happening tomorrow. And just like that, mortality taps you on the shoulder with a frozen mitten. Death is never far here. Not in a gloomy way, more in a make sure you look decent just in case they burn your body this week kind of way. And if you do die, let's hope you've lived interesting enough to earn the deluxe send-off, the Viking funeral. Equal parts ceremony, fire hazard, and social event of the season. The basic version? A small burial with a few items, some muttered prayers, and a mild sense of awkwardness. But if you've made a name for yourself, slain enemies, led raids, or just told a really good saga, you might get the full upgrade. Your body placed on a boat, loaded with your favorite stuff, set ablaze, and pushed into the afterlife like the world's most dramatic Amazon return. And this isn't just a symbolic thing. You're sent off with real belongings, your best weapons, shiny jewelry, maybe even a horse if your estate's feeling generous, and in rare, deeply uncomfortable cases, an actual human, usually a slave, occasionally a volunteer, and possibly, just possibly, someone who didn't realize standing next to the boat wasn't part of the job description. The planning process is oddly practical. According to accounts like Ahmad ibn Fadlan's, your estate gets divided into 3 parts. 1/3 to the family, 1/3 for clothes to make you look decent while burning, and 1/3 for alcohol. Because nothing says respectful farewell like everyone getting mildly drunk around a flaming corpse raft. But it's not all grim. These funerals are also about legacy. Your story gets told, your name gets passed on, and everyone gets a moment to pretend they liked you more than they actually did. It's Viking closure, wrapped in smoke and set to the soundtrack of someone playing a horn slightly off-key. As you sit by the hearth that evening, still thawing from your skating victory-failure combo, you can't help but imagine your own send-off. Would you get the boat, the feast, the slightly judgmental goose carved into your tombstone? Maybe. But for now, you're still alive, still sore, and still wearing the same wool leggings since Tuesday, which, all things considered, is kind of a miracle already. After a long day of chores, stew, ice skating injuries, and casual funeral planning, it starts to make sense why so many Vikings were eager to hop on a boat and sail somewhere else, anywhere else. Raiding wasn't just about wealth or fame. It was, in many cases, the medieval equivalent of needing a weekend away from your relatives, and the goat that thinks your bed is its emotional support haystack. But don't get it twisted. Raiding was not a spontaneous hobby. It was a full production. Boats needed repairing, weapons had to be sharpened, and someone always had to argue about which coast to terrorize this season. It was like planning a group vacation. If your vacation included swords, battle cries, and a 50-50 chance of getting hit with something sharp before lunch. As the newest member of the crew, your job isn't glamorous. Mostly, you row. And when you're not rowing, you carry stuff, pretend you're not seasick, and try to look mildly terrifying despite wearing boots that squeak when wet. The longship itself is a marvel. Narrow, sleek, fast, and absolutely unforgiving on the tailbone. Built for speed, shallow waters, and maximum drama when approaching foreign shores. Landing is never subtle. The Viking version of knocking involves 30 men jumping out of a boat at full speed while yelling things that sound heroic if you don't understand Old Norse. Inside the village, it's chaos. People running, treasure being grabbed, someone inevitably chasing a goat that absolutely didn't ask to be here. You follow orders, do your part, and try not to loot anything cursed or sacred. Valuable things are everywhere. Silver, tools, spices, cloth. But just as valuable, at least to your Viking crewmates, are people. Captives taken during raids often become thralls, which is a polite Viking word for guess who's chopping firewood forever. And yet, in the middle of all the mayhem, something oddly satisfying happens. You catch your cousin tossing you a stolen sack like it's a football. You shout something dramatic while falling off a bench. Someone laughs when you trip but then pulls you up anyway. It's messy, loud, morally questionable, but undeniably bonding. This is Viking team building, equal parts crime, chaos, and character development. By the time you're back on the ship, cold, sore, and mysteriously holding someone else's helmet, you're tired but buzzing. You didn't fall overboard. You didn't scream when the chicken attacked. You brought something back, even if it's just a weird bruise, and a better story than everyone at home. All in all, a solid first raid. After a raid, there's a special kind of tired that settles into your bones, part exhaustion, part delayed disbelief that you're somehow still alive, and part muscle confusion from rowing, running, and almost being tackled by a chicken. So when you finally drop into a seat by the hearth, the last thing you want to do is move. Lucky for you, this is when the scold takes over. He doesn't fight. He doesn't farm. He definitely doesn't chase livestock. His weapon is memory, rhythm, and an alarming number of metaphors. A scold is essentially a Viking bard with main character energy, and as soon as he stands up, the longhouse goes quiet, not because he commands fear, but because if you miss a line, there's no rewind button, and you don't want to be the one whispering, "Wait, who died?" in the middle of a war poem. The stories he tells are part history, part myth, and part pure dramatic flair. Heroes who slayed giants, gods who got drunk and ruined everything, women who outsmarted entire kingdoms, and one time it snowed so hard, people just accepted being snowmen for a week. But what makes it more chaotic, charmingly so, is the language. Vikings loved kennings, poetic riddles that take something simple and make it as unnecessarily complicated as possible. You don't say blood, you say woundsea. You don't say death, you say sleep of the sword. And you definitely don't say, "I'm drunk." You say, "My thoughts are swimming in the goat's golden river," because yes, there's also a goat involved. That goat, Hydron, is possibly the most beloved animal in Norse mythology. While regular goats offer milk and judgment, this one stands on the roof of Valhalla and produces mead, endlessly, from her udders, without explanation. You'd think someone made that up after 4 cups too many, but the scold assures you it's canon, and honestly, no one's questioning it because the mead is flowing and it feels rude to interrupt. By now, the stories are mixing with laughter, the fires cracking like background applause, and the air is filled with that special kind of warmth that comes from fermented honey and finally not freezing. You sit back, cup in hand, listening to words that may or may not be historically accurate, and realize something oddly comforting. You don't have to be a warrior or a poet to be remembered. You just need someone willing to exaggerate your life after you're gone, preferably with dramatic lighting and a very confident voice. And if your legend includes a magic goat that dispenses alcohol like a divine party keg, well, let's just say you're doing better than most. You've made it. Somehow. After the longhouses, the soup that judged you, the skates made of actual bone, and the fashion choices that should have come with a legal disclaimer, you're still here, alive, mostly intact, and only slightly emotionally scarred. You've survived winter without indoor heating, mealtime without seasoning, marriage without privacy, and a raiding expedition that started with confidence and ended with bruises, 2 chickens, and a dented helmet that wasn't yours. You didn't just live like a Viking. You endured it, complained only a little, and laughed more than you probably should have. Sure, it wasn't comfortable, it wasn't clean, it wasn't fair, balanced, or remotely gluten-free, but it was Viking, messy, noisy, relentless, and somehow full of charm, like a muddy dog that keeps bringing you sticks and trauma. And maybe you didn't become a warrior poet or get sent off on a flaming boat with your favorite axe and 4 hand-carved metaphors, but you now understand why these people left home so often. Sometimes the longhouse isn't big enough for your ambition or your goats. So, after all that, there's just one thing left to decide. If you had to choose, would you rather spend your final night snuggled up with a goat under a damp fur blanket, or be launched into the afterlife on a flaming ship with your mother-in-law's cooking pot and a guy who snores like a dying walrus? Let us know, goat or boat. And hey, if you enjoyed this ridiculous journey through Viking survival, click like to show us you're brave enough to live it, and hit subscribe if you'd much rather stay here in the 21st century with soap, socks, and doors. Thanks for sticking around. You've earned your mead. Skål and good night.